Okay, so how do we solve an equation like this? So we have 2 to the x power is equal to the square root of 7. Now, this is not to be confused with this equation, which looks very similar. It would be x squared is equal to the square root of 7. This particular equation is what type of equation? Hopefully you said this is a quadratic equation, and this would be correct. So this is pretty much kind of like a pretty standard type of problem in like Algebra 1 course. But this particular problem is a little bit more sophisticated, and you're really not going to see this, generally speaking, in an Algebra 1 course. This is for those of you that are going to be taking like Algebra 2, maybe college algebra, certainly pre-calculus. So a little bit more involved, but nothing that you can't understand. So if you're just curious on how to solve this type of equation, stick around for a couple minutes because you're definitely going to learn something very important about mathematics. But I'm going to get into all this in just one second. But first, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John. I'm the founder of TC Math Academy. I'm also a middle and high school math teacher. I've been teaching math for decades, and I'm telling you right now, there's no such thing as a bad math student. So if you are struggling in mathematics, if you think that you're just naturally bad at math, I'm telling you that's not the case. So to be successful in math, it requires two things. One, you got to be willing to work hard at the subject. So, don't give up, and work even harder than you currently are. But the second thing you need is great math instruction, clear and understandable. And that's where I can help you out. So if you're at the middle school, high school, or even college level, and you need assistance in mathematics, check out my Math Help program. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description of this video. Also, if you're preparing for any sort of test with a math section, something like the GED, ASVAB, SAT, teacher certification exam, I can help you out. If you homeschool, I have great homeschool middle and high school math courses that can help you out. And if this video helps you out, don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel. That helps me out big time. Okay, so let's get into how to solve this type of equation. Matter of fact, if you can describe this, what is the classification of this type of equation? Go ahead and put that into the comment section if you think you know what it is, because every type of equation can be described or classified in this particular way in algebra. But let's go ahead and get into it right now. Okay, so what we're dealing with here is an exponential equation. So if you got that correct, I'll go ahead and give you a nice little happy face for being so astute at mathematics. But here, the variable that we're trying to solve for is in the exponent. Okay, so it's 2 to the x power is equal to the square root of 7. So this is an interesting problem. And again, this is not to be confused with a problem like this. Okay, so here, the variable is the base. Okay, we're dealing with the power, but here, this is a quadratic equation. This is a degree 2 polynomial. So they look similar, okay, but where the exponent or where the variable is at is critically important in terms of what to do here. So this is 2 to the x power. This is an exponential equation. And what you need to understand is when you're dealing with exponential equations, you're going to be using something called logarithms to solve those type of equations. So we're going to be using logarithms, which is a huge topic in more advanced math. Again, those of you that are going to be at the kind of like the Algebra 2 level, college algebra, intermediate algebra, anything along those lines. Certainly, again, pre-calculus. Typically, this is not taught at the Algebra 1 level, maybe a little bit of this, but generally this is taught later on. So if you're like in an Algebra 1 course, you may not have seen this. Now, along with exponential equations using logarithms to solve them, the reverse is true. Okay, when you see a logarithmic equation, you're going to use exponents to solve those. That's for another video, but just know that exponential functions and logarithmic functions are inverses of one another. This is a huge topic in these various levels of mathematics. So when you get there, you're going to have to know a lot about exponential functions, logarithmic functions, and on your trusty little calculator, if you were ever curious about these buttons, the LOG button and this other button, it's an LN button. These here are logarithmic functions that you're going to need. So you're going to need a calculator, you're going to need to know or have access to these questions or these buttons or these functions. And the LOG is log base 10. Then we call that the common log. And then this other button over here is called the natural logarithm. Again, I'm going to leave a lot of stuff out here because this is trying to cram like a full chapter's worth of mathematics into a little video. But I just want to kind of answer the curiosity. Hopefully some of you have it, like, hey, how do we solve this type of equation? So let's get into it now. Of course, we're going to use logarithms as this is an exponential equation. And let me show you how easy this is, okay? All right, so here is our equation. 2 to the x power is equal to the square root of 7. Now, I'm going to, you can see I have already done the work here, but let's take this problem here. Let's say I had 2 to the x power is equal to 9. So how could I solve this problem? Now, let's just table this here for a second because I want to just show something to you here, right? So you might say, well, what's 2 to the first power? Okay, let's just replace this x with the 1. Well, 2 to the first power is, I'm sorry, not 4, it is 2, correct? So 2 to the first power is 2. So we're looking for 2 to some power is 9. So let's increase the power because this is too small. So let's go 2 to the second power. Okay, well, 2 to the second power is 2 times 2. Of course, that's 4. Okay, but I'm looking for 2 to the what power is 9. So let's go up another number. 2 cubed is what? 2 times 2 times 2. That is 8. Okay, so we're getting pretty close here. All right, so 2 cubed is 8. I'm looking for 2 to some power is 9. So let's go up again another power, 2 to the fourth. That's going to be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. This is going to be 16. So, of course, we're looking for 2 to the what power is 9. So 2 to the fourth is too big. Okay, so this is bigger than 9. So our answer here is going to be closer to 3. So it might be like 3.1 or something or the other. So you could kind of, through a method of trial and error, kind of guess what power 2 to this, what a power is 9. And going through that, you're going to have to test a lot of numbers to get your answer closer and closer and closer. Well, somebody hundreds of years ago figured out, hey, this is something that we need to be able to work on. And it was kind of the development of logarithms. Okay, it's a huge part of mathematics. And the value of logarithms, namely, is to solve these type of equations. And just as a little bit of an aside, I'm going to get back to this problem here in a second. Back in the good old, maybe when I went to high school, like in the 1980s, there were calculators around, but the old school textbooks, okay, you don't really see this anymore. In the back of a math textbook here, if you were taking like a trigonometry or an algebra 2 course, you had all these logarithmic trigonometric functions, all these tables of values. You don't really see that anymore because it's all on our handy dandy calculators and whatnot. But anyways, those mathematicians hundreds of years ago had those same log tables. Okay, so just a little math history in there, and why we need these logarithmic tables. Of course, you don't need those tables because you have your trusty calculator. So again, you're going to need a calculator to do this problem. Okay, back to the problem. So 2 to the what power is equal to the square root of 7? Well, what you need to do here is take the log of both sides, okay? The log of both sides. You could take the natural log. Just so you know, you could take the log. The way you would write it is simply the way I have it written right here, log. Now, I'm not going to be teaching you this completely in here. I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of a taste of how we apply logarithms, how you solve basic exponential equations. All right, so what you're going to do is take the logarithm both sides. Now, here, this part of the problem, log 2 to the x, I need to get this variable in a better position. Now, when you study logarithms, you study what we call properties of logarithms, and one of the great properties of logarithms is when you put a logarithm in front of a power like this, you can take this variable and write it in front of this logarithm, like x log 2. Okay, that's the same thing, or that's equivalent to log of 2 to the x power. That's a property of logarithms. You're going to learn these properties as you study this, but this is really the secret to doing this problem. Okay, so this variable x is up as an exponent. I can drop it down in front of this log 2 expression just like this. Okay, why can I do that? There's something called this particular property of logarithms that allows us to do that. Now, one thing that you need to understand is this log, if you log 2 or an log square root of 7, these are simply decimal values. These are just nothing but numbers, okay? So you can go into your calculator and take log2 and a decimal will pop out. Same thing, log or the logarithm of square root of 7. A decimal is going to pop out. So this right here is really just a basic linear equation. Okay, this is x times some number, like x times 3 is equal to another number, maybe like 12. So this is x times 3. Now in algebra, we don't write it that way. We'd write it 3x is equal to 12. But if I want to solve for x, I simply just divide both sides of the equation by 3, and I will have solved the equation. That's what we're going to do here. Okay, so when we know this particular property of logarithms, we just drop that x in front of here, and then we just look at this log2. It looks complicated, but these are nothing but numbers. Okay, so to solve for x, I'm simply going to divide both sides of the equation by log2. Okay, just as what's going on here. So x is equal to this. So now I need to go into my calculator and do some number crunching. I go the log of the square root of 7. I'll get a decimal there. You could put this all in parentheses and do this in one shot, or you just get this value and divide it by log 2. You should get a decimal around 1.4036. Okay, so that is the answer. And notice it's not an exact answer because the more precise this decimal is, the better our answer is. So this is just an approximation. But what does that mean? Well, it means this, okay? Remember, 2 to some power is equal to the square root of 7. Well, if I take 2 to the 1.4036, okay, you're going to get a decimal that's going to be pretty close to the answer you'll get for the square root of 7, okay? Very, very close. Not perfectly close, but the more accurate, the more places I use in my decimal here, the more accurate my answer will be. Okay, so this is kind of an introduction to logarithmic and exponential functions, a huge part of algebra, a little bit more advanced algebra, but nothing that you can't do. So if you never saw this before, hopefully you're like, ooh, interested enough to continue on. But if you're going to be taking any sort of math class, again, Algebra 2, most you're going to have to take Algebra 2 to get through high school, or college algebra to get through college. So, you will be dealing with this, and just, again, this is not that difficult. But if you already understood that, well, let me go ahead and give you a nice little happy face for being such an awesome math student. I'll throw in an A+ there. But again, this might seem overly complex, but when you're learning math, you have to take things one skill at a time. So you can't do this type of stuff until you've mastered everything you learned in Algebra 1 and Pre-Algebra, etc., etc. So irrespective of where you're at in mathematics, okay, just take it one step at a time. And if you need additional help on any of this stuff, I have tons of videos on logarithms in my YouTube channel. Of course, I teach this thoroughly in all my higher level math courses, Algebra 2, College Algebra, Pre-Calculus. I have all those. You can find those in my Math Help program. Okay, so with that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in your mathematics adventures. Thank you for your time and have a great day.